Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you and welcome to Islam and Life with me, Tariq Ramadan, broadcasting from London. In today's show, we ask the question, what can be done about France's anti-hijab environment?
Earlier this year, a young Muslim woman was convicted over a dispute with police officers who arrested her for wearing a full-face Islamic veil or niqab. Although the face veil is a pre-Islamic cultural practice with no basis in the Quran, the incident has reignited the debate as to whether France truly is a free society for Muslim women. Commentators have expressed deep concern over the police's brutal response to the young Muslim woman. There have been several cases of harassment and persecution against Muslim women, including students and teachers in France and in the wider continent for wearing the hijab. This is despite the hijab being a perfectly legal clothing item. France is home to the largest Muslim population in Western Europe. This week on Islam and Life, we ask, what can be done about France's anti-hijab environment?
The situation in France is quite worrying. As we heard, it started in '89 with the whole controversy around this headscarf, and then year after year, every 6 months we have a new controversy. We had a new law in 2004, and then recently a new law about the niqab, the veil covering the face, prohibited in the streets. And add to this so many other stories where we had women being targeted in the streets, women being subject to violence in the streets because they were visible. The new visibility of Muslims in France, it's a problem, but at the same time we have a legal system that is now put to target the Muslims in the way where it's not possible to go with the headscarf in school, it's difficult to be visible as a Muslim, to build a mosque in the country. France is central to the discussion in Western Europe because it's a specific country, a specific environment, but its influence is quite important. So we have to understand what is the situation in France, why is it happening in France, and what are the reasons and what could be the responses coming from the Muslims and the French Muslims in France. And to answer all these questions, I'm joined by my guest, Islamic and political commentator, Dr. Sayyid Inayatullah Andrami. Thank you so much for being with us here. It's a very important discussion because very often in Western Europe and even in the West as a whole, France is playing a very important role. It's an exception, and at the same time, it's a country which wants to impose, in a way, a very specific perception and saying we know about Islam much more than the others and we know what are the problems. So if we start with France, what should we know? What is happening in this country which is so different in a way from other countries in Western Europe?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I would not prefer taking a narrow view of focusing at French or France as a nation or a national character. But if I go down that line, there is something to it also. For example, you can see that they are very much keen about French language, and they had a legislation passed that we will see what sort of intrusions have gone into French language and cleanse it, make it pure French. That's something that looks very stupid, but that's what they did. So this is, if you call some sort of national character, but we should not look at it only on with that angle. That's a very myopic, very narrow angle. I think I have been watching this since it has been happening. I think there are the most fundamental level which the French government has often articulated is the conflict between what they call religion and secularism. They have been very often talking of secularism and going and being purely secular. Now, this is debatable, that they are pushing a huge agenda under the garb of secularism, but they are making the dichotomy between religion and secularism, and they think hijab is a symbol of religion. Hijab is religion in public. Hijab is religion speaking and expressing itself in public. And hijab is really a very manifest thing, very obvious. I mean, I sometimes feel for my women folk, for my sisters or for Muslim women, that they have to really come out, and they come out with a very obvious sort of declaration. They speak. When they wear hijab, they speak.
Yeah, so let me come to this, because you started by saying something which is quite interesting, that we might not want to focus on this, but there could be something which has to do with a mindset, which is our exception among all the other nations. And we have what, you know, the very essence of the language, but also what was called, you know, resisting the American influence, saying this is our cultural exception. So we have to protect that. So there is something which is a sense of the unity of the Republic is to be strong with our identity. And what you are adding with something which is important is that the perceived identity is based on this laïcité, which is secularity or secularism, versus the visible religious presence in the public sphere. So rejecting this and say we finished with Judaism and with Christianity, now we have to deal with Islam because it's the new player on the ground with this new visibility. So now, in the name of this, what we are facing is two things. A discourse that sometimes is very close to racism and Islamophobia. And on the other side, on the legal ground, is discriminations. So many French Muslims, they don't know how to deal with this. And we have even leaders saying, okay, we need to be invisible. What you are saying is that there is a new visibility. So what should be the answer of Muslims facing France, accepting this, or going very far by saying there is in your mindset and there is in the way you deal with the issue something which is close to racism, prejudices, and structural discrimination? What would be your take on this when you are saying, I fear for my sisters that they are visible, and this is true? So what should be the strategy there?
Yeah, I mean, this is, when we say they should accept it, what should they accept?
That's the point, exactly.
It's not only the ideological argument, it is the practical impact they are facing. And it has translated itself into a sort of persecution. Just some months back, we saw a woman had a miscarriage because she was assaulted in Paris. So it has come to almost, it has translated itself into racist attacks and racist discourse. So now we have to think that what are we going to accept? Because on one side, it's not, for Muslims, it's not merely symbolic. I'm not talking of any full niqab. I'm saying the modest dress, the crux of from the Muslim point of view, from the Sharia point of view, the crux is modest dress. For men as well as women.
So facing back with this, knowing the atmosphere of France, now say, okay, you have no choice. At the end, these are the requirements. And as a Muslim, if you want to wear the headscarf, you should be allowed, because freedom of conscience means that at the end, the requirements are going as far as I decide for myself what is my practice. You have some women, and I was myself attacked by some women by saying, I don't think, as you are saying, I don't think that the niqab is an Islamic prescription. Say, this is my right, so I should be free to do that. Now, at that point, what should be the position of the French Muslims, in your view, when it comes to facing the government, facing law, facing the legal structure, the legal systems telling you, school, no way, streets, no way. Sometimes even getting a mask, it's very difficult because you have people preventing. And you have the populist trends that we can see now in the UK, but they are very powerful with the Front National in France today. So what should be the strategy, and what does this reveal about the French society?
As I told you, this this operates on more than one levels. One I told was the religion versus secularity or secularism. But the other thing is also, which I have noticed in French debates, the other thing is the view of the social philosophy. They think the Anglo-Saxon, they call it Anglo-Saxon model of communities. Yeah. Now you will see in this country, there are communities rather than individuals. In Muslims also there are they call Muslim communities. Now, in community, individuals can have their way and they are a part of community. Yeah. In France, they say that we want to live together. And this
as individuals together.
As individuals together.
Yeah. The Muslim communities, in fact, in France, over the last 2 generations, we can see that they have been negotiating with the state and negotiating their presence within the society, while it's still very difficult, because it's not only a religious question, it is the consequence of this religious visibility on the job market, in the streets, and what we have in the suburbs, for example, whereas you know that the Muslims are the most important population in jail in France today. Yeah. This is the reality, and more than that, we are dealing with questioning in the streets and sometimes discrimination. We were talking in the VT. We were getting what happened. You were referring to a woman who was beaten by people, but we also have discrimination. So how do they have to deal with this old setting here?
I mean, this has become a sort of when there are legislations, when there are when, for example, the Interior Minister recently, there was a woman who went to nursery, and her small child was going to a museum, and she wanted to accompany her. Yeah. She was told, no, you can't accompany because you are wearing the headscarf.
Exactly, yeah.
And now this was disallowed by a court, and the court said, no, it should not extend to those. But it was overturned by the government. And the Interior Minister said that we won't allow a practice that has to do nothing. I'm telling the words of the Interior Minister. He said, we won't allow a practice, the practice of hijab, which has nothing to do with our values and tradition. Now this is a very dangerous mindset. Yes. Yeah. If you make France a place where everybody should conform to the what's already the native traditions and the values, it won't let the communities grow, and it's not the right way of looking at things, that everything should conform to your own values and traditions. So actually Muslims in France, I think they are, some of them are paying fines, where they are refusing to take out the hijab, and they are paying fines for this. But I think they have a difficult way to go, and
it's difficult. But I think what you are saying is that we have it's multi-layer reality where we are dealing with religious history, and what we are saying about secularity and secularism and religion. What we are talking about the visibility, and what we are also dealing with is this kind of policy coming from the government itself, which is the Home Minister and others who are sometimes targeting the Muslims.
What I wanted, sorry to interrupt you, and what I wanted to tell, the point I wanted to raise there was, when the minister says such things, and when there are legislations again and again, that gives some sort of legitimacy. Although it's not written that it should give legitimacy, but somehow that gives some sort of legitimacy to these racist attacks and Muslim women with hijab becoming targets of, that somehow paves way for it. That is a dangerous thing.
Yes. So at the end, if you have to assess the situation in France, would you say that, for example, there is a specific policy targeting the Muslims? Is this something that you would go as far as to say in France we are now dealing with a policy which is targeting the Muslims? There is the Islamophobia, but it is even more than that in all the different dimensions that we are referring to.
It has almost boiled down to that. I mean, nobody else than Muslims are suffering. So it has almost.
So you have other people. You know, you have the Rome, for example, and people of the people who are immigrant in the society are also suffering in a way.
Yeah, but not to the extent. Not to the extent and not such a discrimination. And also, as we said in the beginning, it was in the intro also, we have in France the biggest Muslim population. And they have been living there. They deserve some respect. So it's almost, it has come down to that. But let me add one more dimension to it. It was said by one of Muslim scholars some time back that as much as the Islam will emerge on political scene at the global level, which we are seeing now, it was not 30, 40 years before. Islam has become a factor in the global politics, an actor in global politics. He said as much as it will emerge on global level, the Muslim population in the Europe, it will be considered, it will have difficult times because it will be considered the extension of an emerging trend. So that's one more angle to this French, what they are doing against hijab and their enthusiasm against curbing visible symbols of Islam, just to make France clean of it. It has to do something with the emergence of Islam on the global level.
I think this is important, that very often we look at France and we look at Europe without connecting this to the international scene, and there is a connection here that is quite important. Now, when it comes to the reaction and the requirements, from where you see the situation, you don't live in France, but you are studying what is happening in France, we are talking about Islamophobia, structural racism, violence even in the streets, in jail, situations that are quite bad, and the perception is that for many Muslims the atmosphere is very heavy, it's very anti-Islamic presence. So what should be the reaction, and what could the Muslims or the French Muslims bring to the discussion in France that is helping France to move on in a better way?
I think the first step would be for the French Muslims to bring some organization into the community. They should speak with one voice, and they should speak with one authentic Islamic voice. There were some programs conducted in Britain also, and you see Muslims are talking in different voices. We should seek guidance from authentic ulama, and it should be Muslims should come out with proper Islamic what's the position of Islam on this. It's not that some people say covering face is not important, some say it is important. We should be coming up with an authentic Islamic position on this. I myself convinced that the hijab and the headscarf is the authentic Islamic position, and that reconciles to the requirements of the state also. The state has the requirements of identity. They should be able to check the identity of the people on streets in public. People cannot keep hiding their faces and you don't know who is who.
So what they are saying about the security measures are understandable.
They have a point there.
Yeah.
So but first it will start when Muslims in France, they develop some organization and they come up with an authentic Islamic position.
But to do what? To face what?
These things are not, they are not, if somebody says, this is my individual right, I do it on my own, this is not a full argument. This is not this is not the whole That's not the whole thing. It's just a piecemeal reaction.
Yes, it's instrumentalized. It's also a pretext to something which is bigger within the society. Is that what we need now? Is you are saying about the unity among the Muslims.
Yeah.
Now the problem is that they are divided. We have different voices. It's not going to happen that we have only one voices or only one voice and one among all the trends. Now the problem in the French situation now is that the perception from outside is that we are dealing with a society which we have double standard when it comes to the citizens. So once again, from this citizenship viewpoint, beyond only talking about unity, there are rights to be protected. And what would be, in your view, the most important thing that we are expecting from the Muslims today in France? To help France, because my point is not Muslims against France, but Muslims as French Muslims in the name of the French society.
Yeah, I mean, to begin with, and the minimum, they should aim at. That's the minimum, and that's where a beginning can be made. That's the minimum, is that they should definitely make it the violence and the discrimination. They should create awareness about it, and they should make sure that the violence and discrimination stops. Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much about that. If we try to summarize what you are saying, I think it's quite important. There is something which has to do with the mindset, something which has to do with the history of France, which is in fact the fact that there is this cultural exceptionalism and trying to protect the language and everything. Muslims living in France are facing discrimination, structural racism, sometimes a very bad perception of Islam, and the new visibility, and this is something which is important, violence even against, that could come from the state, state violence and violence within the civil society are also the daily reality for many Muslims. And what you are saying is that this is time for unity, this is time for a clear understanding of the Islamic references, and not to give out on claiming the rights of the Muslim citizens, because at the end what is also important, this is done not only for Muslims, this is done for equality within a society. While that's all we have time for, please let us know your thoughts and views on any of the show you have seen, and here is the way to contact us.
We at Islam in Life would like to hear your views about the subjects that we discuss. We would also love to hear your suggestions for our program, so get in touch with us. You can share your thoughts with other Islam in Life fans, engage in debate, and find out how to watch our previous shows. Follow us on Twitter at Islam and Life TV, or join us on Facebook by liking our page, Islam and Life on Press TV.
Finally, I would like to thank my guest, Dr. Sayyid Inayatullah Andrami. Thank you so much for being with us and your input. And I hope to see you next week, inshallah.